Al Osborne from UCLA Anderson here again. This is part of the Entrepreneurial Basics series, and today I'm going to really talk to you now a little bit more about innovation. But we're going to begin our discussion of what will turn into disruptive innovation by having a conversation about the process of innovation. And innovation takes place in a variety of ways, but it really is something that moves to change an organization. And innovation is taking a novelty that has been invented and really making something new in products or services. And there are three ways typically in which we see this, and so I'm going to talk first about the process of innovation, how empowering innovations work, then how what we call sustaining innovations assist in that process, and finally what we're going to call efficiency innovations. These are the three types of innovations that can be understood as ways of, in some sense, being precursors to what we're going to call disruptive innovation. Well, now let me begin by talking to you about the first type of innovation, empowering innovations. And many have occurred throughout history. The one I've illustrated on the screen is about the flat TV and how that has been made cheaper and more available. But there are lots of innovations that we could talk about. In the automobile realm, for example, we could go back and think about the Model T Ford, for example, Henry Ford's automobile, which was an empowering innovation, the horseless carriage, as it was called. Well, you see, so an innovation like that, this totally changes the way in which people are able to use what these particular products or services were created. And the example, of course, is making it simpler and cheaper, making it more available to many, so that they'll be able to enjoy the benefits, if you will, that the more previously unaffordable, expensive products were able to provide. Today, we all live with a very simple smartphone, for example, that does a whole variety of things, and not unlike the television set. The simpler smartphone was very expensive. You remember a big device people used to hold to their ears, and even the old flip-flop. Well, innovation, empowering innovations are simply those that make the complexity more available to more of us in society at a lower price. A second type of innovation is what we call sustaining innovation. And this is one where most businesses who provide products and services find themselves. It is replacing their old products that they may be offering with new ones, or the industry itself, through competition, finds ways in which one service is substituted for another. It's not that more products are sold, but that different ones are sold, and it doesn't necessarily grow the economy. A prime example of this might be in the automobile world. We all appreciated the example of Toyota's Prius, for example. But the Prius itself did not do much for Camry sales, which is a substitute product. So it was a sustaining innovation that was adopted by the company to continue with its business. It's a great new product, but it's one that didn't necessarily help the alternative product. Such is the example of the data I have right here, provided by the United States record music revenue chart that you see before you. There was a time in which vinyl records were particularly present, but throughout history you can see how technology changed how people enjoyed music. We're moving from vinyl records, which we find ourselves at some point where vinyl records are being replaced here now by cassettes. And you can see here in I think this is 1985 on your graph, where sales of vinyl records and cassettes are about the same. But then there's an introduction of this form of recorded music being provided on CDs, as described in the orange portion of the chart. You can see that the CDs grow dramatically, and for the first 3 years, say by 1988, it really begins to step out, and by 1988, vinyl records have all but disappeared. Cassettes continue to be part, but you can see that CDs really begin to dominate the way in which music is enjoyed. Finally, several years later, by 2003, cassettes are also have left the fold and are dead, just like vinyl records did a few years later. But we see incipient competition in the form of all sales nearly essentially being CDs being challenged now by what we know accept as really innovation around the corner that is creeping up and did for the last few years, which is file sharing, and that is music being provided through downloads that we're all too familiar with these days. CDs are continuing to be sold, to be sure, but at some point there may well be another innovation down the road, a change in the way in which people enjoy music that might in fact also challenge the accepted ways of downloads. This is all to say here is that there's a pattern that is caused over time. People want to enjoy music in this example, and there are other different technologies that provide the ability to enjoy that music. So living through vinyl and cassettes and CDs and now file sharing are all part of the way in which an industry tries to sustain through innovation its ability to produce sales and enjoy revenues and profits. Now, my simple cell phone right here in my pocket, which I've misplaced, is an example of a continuing evolution, how these phones have also gotten very smart. And you could create a chart similar to this one, where you would see how additive it is and how innovation sustains itself over time with that technology in terms of how people communicate with each other of what was accepted as telephones. Now, the third type of innovation is what we call efficiency innovation. This is primarily geared to reducing the costs of manufacturing and in a way in which delivering existing products. You can see by this chart right here we have a variety of robots, and it's an effort through technology to replace the way in which cars are produced. There are no people in this particular chart, this picture, if you will, but you can see a variety of robots working in different parts of the automobile here, manufacturing a better product without people. So you're delivering the same product and you're reducing your costs dramatically through the use of facilitating innovation, efficiency, reducing innovation. And so robots assembling the cars, working faster, more accurately than people is clearly an innovation in manufacturing that we call an efficiency innovation. And so what kind of an efficiency innovations might we see and that are present in that example of the robots? Well, there are two ways. There are process innovations, and they're that appear inside out, and they're offerings. And these five approaches can be viewed as types of efficiency innovations. Let me take you through some of them right here. The ones that enable the process to be lower cost, and this is entering the value chain, therefore, and as a result of perhaps partnering that might enable others to facilitate in the process and lower costs. Core processes, this is using technologies that improve the proprietary nature that will add value to the ability inside the organization to improve the process. The offering itself, the car or the service, could be improved from a performance point of view, e.g. changing the basic features or creating different functionalities as part of how the offering uses innovation inside out to be further developed. The production system that delivers the offering itself can be extended and thereby improve the way the offering to us as consumers is delivered. And let's not forget that an important part of the offering is the actual service that is provided once the product or the service is in place. And so performance and product systems as well as service are important ways in which the offering is enhanced through efficiency and innovations. But there are a few others, and one could be in the delivery and these are viewed more from the outside in. I had given you some examples from the inside out, but from the outside in, perhaps delivery matters. the channel in which the product is connected to you as a customer matters. This could be, for example, an online as opposed to distribution of a product, as opposed to going to a retail store. So that's one way in which there's innovations in the delivery systems, innovations in how the brand is developed, how you express the benefits to consumers, how you reach them and let them know what the value is that you're providing by how you develop the brand expression from the outside, awareness and so on. Perhaps experience in the delivery in terms of how you create an entire integrated experience for the customer as they enjoy your product or service. And finally, from the outside in, I want to talk about the model itself. How are you going to make money now with the business model that you might adopt? So there could be efficiencies in deciding in payment mechanisms, for example, how you collect revenue. As you can see, a number of facilitating innovations along those lines today for all kinds of services. And finally, how you work in the value chain, and whether or not the enterprise is structured in such a way to networking and taking advantage of those interrelated systems as one way of outside in improving an efficiency in your operation. And so what we've tried to do here in this session is tell you about, first there's the dilemma, there's a problem in how you deal with innovations, the solution, and we're going to talk about then the DNA that you should have to develop that. We talked about empowering innovations that expand the market for a product. We talked about sustaining innovations which replace older products with newer versions, but better, and don't necessarily expand the market itself. And then finally, looking at the innovations that affect the cost side and the supply chain is efficiency innovations. They improve the ability to distribute or produce the product. And then finally, we talked about some innovations that occur in finance, perhaps, or in the delivery chain. These types of innovations are external as opposed to internal, and improve the ability of you to meet your customers' needs. And so we conclude our first look at innovation. We talked about the process of innovation, and in our next section, we hope to talk about disruptive innovation more particularly.